Hi there, welcome to your first assembly of the second half of our summer term. I hope that everybody had a relaxing and safe half-term holiday and you've been, where you can, have been enjoying the weather. Now, what we're going to be doing for lots of you this half-term is you will be receiving weekly assemblies just as we started to do before we broke up. But you will have also been receiving communications from your form tutors who are very, very keen to hear about how you're getting on with everything at home in terms of managing your workload, in terms of just how you are really. So please make sure that in addition to all the work that you're kind of carrying out for your subject teachers online, that you're also checking in with your form tutors so they can have that communication with you. It's so, so important as we head through the second half of the summer term towards the summer holidays, that we make sure that we're keeping all that communication going between ourselves. I would also encourage you to look out for the enrichment activities that are put up on our social media accounts every week with your enrichment leaders, making sure that you're continuing to participate in all the various ways that we offer you. It's really, really important to do that. And I would like to make a special mention of everybody who has entered a submission for the Excellent Student Research Project. I have been absolutely astonished at some of the work that you people are producing at home in response to these strange times that we find ourselves in. So well done to every single one of you that has submitted a project for the Excellent Student Research Project, and you'll be receiving a certificate before the end of the summer term to acknowledge your efforts there. So, you will have received by now some tutor resources that are going to be posted out to you on a weekly basis, and we're going to be following a pattern of things as we would be were we in the academy as per normal. And this week's theme here is World Environment Day. This is an annual event to raise awareness about environmental issues, and it's actually sanctioned by the UN. Now, it's a particularly interesting angle for us this year, because of course our environment, for all of us, fairly recently, has been an interior environment. We've all been staying indoors, and our environment has actually been composed of four walls, and we've spent lots of time on our screens, watching television, on social media, and so on. And something quite profound has actually happened while we've all been inside. And I've had lots of conversations with friends of mine who have kind of noticed similar things. Actually, as all the human beings remained indoors, nature was actually getting louder, and things were happening in our natural spaces that perhaps ordinarily we wouldn't notice. And I'm lucky enough to have a lovely garden, so as I was needing some fresh air one day a couple of weeks ago, I went and stood out in the middle of my garden, and like everyone, like many of you I'm sure, I've watched some fantastic films and drama series and all sorts of things on Netflix and so on over the last few weeks, but I was struck as I stood outside in my garden and looked around at the trees and the skies and so on, at all the drama that was going on around me in the natural world. The susurration of the trees, the noise of the wind as it was blowing through the leaves of these grand trees that stand at the back of my garden was like a symphony, in addition to the bird song, the dramatic skyscapes that we've seen, and other things that we've seen when we've been out on our walks. Wildlife is full of thrilling drama and all kinds of joy. And I would encourage you, especially now with things being developed, to get outside into your gardens. If you're going to go somewhere, take a walk and just try and open yourself up to an experience of nature. And why is all this happening? Why are we recognising bird song more than we perhaps have done in the past? Why do things perhaps appear to be a little bit more apparent to us from the natural world? Well, it's because of these things. Obviously, there's been less traffic on the road. And if you think about the collective noise of traffic, it's going to have a big impact in drowning out those natural sounds that we're starting to hear a bit more. There's less noise pollution. There's less rubbish and waste that's been left around natural parks and spaces, allowing for more of the natural world to enjoy its actual habitat. And it made me a little bit sad, actually, because I thought to myself, well, in order for the natural world to celebrate itself and reveal itself in all its glory, we had to take a step back. We had to remain inside a little bit because of the things that we perhaps were doing as a society to our natural spaces. So it's very important for us to think about that. And on the back of my experience in my back garden, I actually got an app on my phone to recognise birdsong, because there was this birdsong that I would listen to about 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock every sort of late afternoon. And I thought, oh, I wonder what bird that is. I'm hopeless with things like that, so I wanted to find out. And I got this app and it told me it was a blackbird. So I started to, and as you'll appreciate, I started to dig up some poems on blackbirds. And I came across a wonderful poem by one of my favourite poets, Seamus Heaney, about a blackbird, actually, about quite an inspiring story of a medieval hermit called St. Kevin, who had a bit of an encounter with a blackbird. And it actually made me think an awful lot, actually, about how we are going to re-emerge after lockdown and what our future relationship should be with the natural world. And I'd like to read you this poem in our assembly today. Essentially, before I begin, I'll tell you the story. So, as I've said, Kevin was a religious hermit who wanted to completely isolate himself from society and spend many hours of the day in prayer to God. So he would lock himself away and devote his time to that. One day, as he was gazing out into the natural environment that his room was facing, he put his hand out sort of casually, absent-mindedly, out of the window, and a blackbird landed on it. And this caused a problem for St. Kevin, because the blackbird actually started to build a nest in his hand. And such was the time that Kevin was contemplating and looking at this blackbird building a nest, that actually time went on, and he eventually, this bird, laid some eggs in the nest. So of course Kevin couldn't move from that point. And he stood, arms stretched out, outside this window, so the story goes, for weeks and months. And I just want to read you this poem that gets us to reflect on, actually, our relationship and our responsibilities for protecting nature. St. Kevin and the Blackbird by Seamus Heaney. And then there was St. Kevin and the Blackbird. The saint is kneeling, arms stretched out, inside his cell. But the cell is narrow, so one upturned palm is out the window, stiff as a crossbeam, when a blackbird lands and lays in it and settles down to nest. Kevin feels the warm eggs, the small breast, the tucked, neat head and claws, and finding himself linked into the network of eternal life, is moved to pity. Now he must hold his hand like a branch out in the sun and rain for weeks, until the young are hatched and fledged and flown. And since the whole thing's imagined anyhow, imagine being Kevin. Which is he? Self-forgetful, or in agony all the time? From the neck on out down through his hurting forearms, are his fingers sleeping? Does he still feel his knees? Or has the shut-eye blank of under-earth crept up through him? Is there distance in his head? Alone and mirrored clear in love's deep river, to labour and not to seek reward he prays. A prayer his body makes entirely, for he has forgotten self, forgotten bird, and on the riverbank forgotten the river's name. Now, as I've said, this poem makes me think about the responsibilities that we have in caring for and protecting our natural environment. And actually, lockdown has taught me certainly an awful lot about how to engage and enjoy the natural world. And the paradox, of course, is this has all been created by a situation where we've all remained indoors. How will we, when all this is over, learn from our experiences? How will we treat our natural environment? Have we learnt to be a little bit more respectful of our natural spaces, a little bit more caring of them, a little bit more engaged in the excitement that nature can bring to us? I think that's a very important lesson. I'll give you an example of how this affected me directly. I went paddleboarding for the first time on a beautiful river in Chelmsford. And I was warned actually by some other people just before I set off. You need to be careful because the swans have just had their babies, they're cygnets. And actually they've had the river all to themselves for the last 2 months, and they don't take kindly to the humans coming back out into their natural space. So I had to be very, very careful that as I was paddling along the lake there, that I kept a real distance from the swans, who were kind of looking at me with a beady eye, making sure that I kept away from the little cygnets. And that's just one story that reminds us of the importance of our responsibility to be mindful and respectful of our natural spaces. So this is what I'm asking you to reflect on this week when we're thinking about World Environment Day. I want you to think about the ways in which you respect your own environment, perhaps things that you might feel a little bit guilty about and perhaps could do better. We all have those. It's about patience and understanding. If I relate this directly to our experience of lockdown, you know, you'll frequently see lots of queues outside shops now. That's going to require a lot of patience and understanding from us. And that's to do with each other, but of course this applies to the natural world as well. Just as I respected the space of the swans and her cygnets, it's about us respecting and understanding our position in all of this. Now, a reminder to you all during these times. Yes, we are hearing stories and we know from the government that various aspects of the lockdown are being lifted. And there are greater things that we can now do as individuals. But please be mindful that social distancing is still in place. It's still a requirement. We do not want to hear stories of groups of people, groups of young people, wandering around in parks and in roads and on bikes in the streets in large groups. That does not conform to social distancing, and you are putting yourself and others at risk if you are doing that. So please, please, we don't want to hear any stories of Belfairs students participating in groups like that. The advice is to stay at home still. You are, of course, encouraged to take appropriate forms of exercise, but certainly not congregating in large groups. The advice remains here from the government to stay alert so we can control the virus and we can save lives. And I just want to finish on a thought for all of us. The theme of this year's World Environment Day is biodiversity, which essentially is the idea that the natural environment is made up of lots of different species, lots of different groups of natural phenomena. Human beings and us are but one part. And I was shown a video made by Mr. Riley earlier on this week. He's got a drone now, and he's captured a beautiful aerial footage of Belfairs, the immediate community, but also the wider landscape of Lee and beyond. And we're going to end our assembly today by looking at that. First of all, I want you to see if you can find your house, because that will be very exciting for you to do if you can spot it. But I also want you to consider your place as one individual part of our greater biodiverse community. I look forward to continuing to hear about your work and your excellent contributions. Please think about the things we've spoken about this afternoon. Please get in contact with your tutors, engaging with the tutor programs, and we look forward to seeing you all back in school whenever that time comes.